previously I was a journalist at Les Echos, so economical newspaper, and it always struck me when I was a journalist how a small chain of events could become like a supermassive trend. And I think what we're doing here at 2050, and what we're trying to see, tackle, is to enlighten and identify those very, very early on signals. So that's why I joined the team, and I'm super thrilled to have it. And I think it's super relevant also for you guys, LPs, that we can share our views of the news. There's so many news out there, and it can be very frustrating. So every time we're gonna interact with you, we will try to give you our perspective on a few events that occur in the past weeks. So that's what we're gonna do here with Marie. And there's a selection of 3 actually type of news that I think are relevant to what we are trying to do. And the first one is kind of iconic, but it's a very small movement that appears. It's the way the companies are shaping their governments. So, of course, you all heard about Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard, the way he gave away his shares to a fund, a perpetual fund. But he's not the only one. Actually, in France, there's another guy named Charles Kloboukov from Léa Nature. I don't know if you heard of him. He's actually also giving away his shares to a trust. And also in Scotland, the beauty company Faith in Nature named Mother Nature at his board. So I think there's a few signals that are interesting to look at, and I wanted Marie to give us your perspective on this.
Yeah, sure. I think we see a big questioning around what should be the right governance for companies, which is one of what this signals is saying, and the other one is how should the commons play a role in that. So if you look at governance, I think this whole movement that is really visible now that Yvon Chouinard did this very big move with Patagonia, who was a very advertised, there was a lot of communication around it, is this idea that you can give away part of your stake of a company to a foundation or to a purpose trust like we did. And that can go up to 100% as what we did, for example. But it's actually pretty old in the sense that this is a thing that is very classic in the Nordics. You might not know it, but 60% of the Danish stock exchange valuation is actually held through companies that are owned by foundations. There's different percentage. It's not fully owned. They are also having a publicly listed part of their shares, but there always is a foundation that has certain control rights and that is funding things that are key to the mission of the company. So it's actually a movement that is getting bigger, and that raised the question of, do we actually have to have for one vote, one financial right? Is that the right structure? And what's interesting is that one of the fields of the greatest innovation around governance is in Web3. There's a lot of questioning around what is the right, can we build decentralized governance in companies which can actually build new type of trust within organization that are more decentralized, or that you don't need to trust because the contract is building trust within, and which is one of the reasons we invested in Kickstarter, for example, because they're going full Web3, but they have a very strong thinking around how should we split governance and utility rights. So who should be taking decisions around what are the what next feature should we build at the platform level? And they want to integrate users in that, for example. But what are the decisions that should be taken at a very strategic level? And they don't want only shareholders to be implied in that, and they're adding a lot of stakeholders in that. So I think very interesting movement going on in governance, key to Web3, and a lot of things that can be learned from existing shareholding foundations model in the Nordics.
There's another topic that we wanted to address with you.
Absolutely. We have seen as well in the last month that there's been a drop, not only in valuation and in the markets, but also in the number of unicorns that that has been. There's only 18 this year, new unicorns, compared to 136, I think, last quarter compared to 136 the quarter before, or a year before at the same quarter, sorry. And so that raises the question, and you who are still a very deep witness of what's going on in this whole tech unicorn industry, what is your take on that?
Well, it's funny because unicorn is kind of the flashy word of what we were looking at as an ecosystem. When I took over at Les Echos and trying to understand what was happening, there were 2 unicorns in France. So, of course, every time there was a new unicorn, whether it's in France, in Europe, it made the big titles, headlines, and everybody started to look at it like if it was the gold rush. And I think it's super important that we look at this number right now to at least say that we don't know the future for sure, because I remember very vividly end of 2019 in New York, there's this big fund, private equity fund manager who's telling me like winter is coming like right now. It's right now. We are in November and in December it's over. So COVID comes and of course everybody says it's over. Investor won't invest in startup anymore. There won't be any more unicorns. It's dead. And of course, the total opposite happens, and valuation went up in the stock markets, in the private sector, and it came to a point where we actually wouldn't make any sense. And now we see the collapse of it. So I think what it's so important for us as investor now and in a firm investment is to really acknowledge the fact that we are entering a cycle that those cycles will be very, very short, and we don't know how high they will go, how low they will go down, but they will be very short. So that's why it's super important that around us, with the stewards, we have people that have experienced enough things so they can help us and to make the right decision in terms of investment and the way we assess the market. So it's still a relevant thing to watch, but from a different perspective. And there's also one last topic that needs to be addressed because it's super relevant to what we do also. And we were driven by fact. And as a former journalist, I was always driven by facts. And it's very important to understand that 2021, the level of investment in impact startups, if I ask you the question, the location, where was the geography where you had the most investment in impact startups, I'm probably sure that you wouldn't say the Nordics, but it's the Nordics with 5.5 billions in 2021. And coincidence or not, that's a geography that we are addressing like very, very, very vividly. So I think it's very important. And now, Mary, you telling us why it's so important to 2050 that we build bridges with this region.
Yes, and not only is it important in terms of volume, like 5 billion euros, but it's 31%, is that correct, of all the investment made in tech in the Nordics. So it's the biggest proportion of the money within different geographies that is going into impact companies. It is not a surprise for us because we've been traveling to Stockholm, to Oslo, to Helsinki numbers of time, and we see it happening on the ground. I think one of the things that was pretty impressive to understand why that is the case is that they have this systemic thinking that I have not found elsewhere so deeply. So they really act as an ecosystem. They feel they're part of a natural ecosystem, but also of a societal and business ecosystem in general. And they work very well together. This ecosystem funding that we have by building both a venture portfolio and a commons portfolio and making them work together is kind of native there. So it's one of our potential co-investor which is Guillaume, who has a very close model in terms of evergreen structure than what we're doing, and that they're focused on regenerative food, that actually introduced us to the Stockholm Resilience Center. And the Stockholm Resilience Center is one of the pioneers in the research around everything into building food resilience system or business resilience system in general, right? And now we're partnering with them on a number of things. So it's this link between business and research is done, but also with governments and institutions. So if you look at Vinnova, for example, which is kind of the innovation agency in Sweden, their main focus in terms of startup acceleration is to, and from the beginning, is to be focused on sustainability. And that has been for 12 or 15 years. They always did that. And so it's ingrained in this systemic thinking, but also in this idea of building resilience and sustainability. And it is also enforced by not only the governments, but by the funding of these public institutions. So the equivalent of what we have in France, which is BPI France, like public investors, they will not look at the most successful venture fund now, today in 2022, if they don't have impact at the heart of their investment strategy. They would just not look at it. So even funds like Northzone, who have been a very successful investor in iZettle, in Spotify, and that have a huge track record, some of the public investment funds, the very big public pension funds, they will just not even think of investing in them if they don't change their strategy by putting impact in the middle. So it's really ingrained in the whole strategy, and both on the academic world, on the government side, and also on the startup side, with a lot of collaboration, like another startup we have in the portfolio, Climate View. They built their product by working with the Swedish government in building the climate plan for 3 years. And now they have the best product on the market to sell to cities. So this is really impressive, and it's a very big bet for us, 2050, to continue engaging our action in these ecosystems, to leverage what they're doing and bring it up to the next level and learn from it, but also to be able to build a truly European action. Because if you have France and the Nordics already, it's a lot easier to bring that into a true European action.
And it's only the beginning, so hopefully you will be able to go up on the journey with us and see how it falls down in the next month and years. There will be many things to do. So it's time for us to actually give the floor to our stewards, because that's what you came from.